Okay, let's unpack this. So you open an app, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly you're just scrolling past, I don't know, a drill for €3,
Yeah.
fake nails for like 89 cents, a Bluetooth speaker for €4.
It's shipping's included.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And shipping is included. It genuinely feels too good to be true, like you're dreaming or something.
It really does. You see these prices, you maybe order something almost like an impulse buy, and then, it actually shows up at your door.
Yeah.
And you're kind of left scratching your head thinking, how on earth do they even cover the postage, let alone the actual item?
Exactly. And, well, that's Temu, isn't it? This app with these almost unbelievable prices.
Mm-hmm.
It's gotten incredibly popular, but frankly, it's also becoming seriously concerning for quite a few reasons.
Yeah.
Because what looks like just another fun place to grab a bargain, maybe like AliExpress used to feel,
Right.
it's actually, well, the sources say it's a pretty formidable machine, operating with a very specific, very deliberate strategy.
And that's a really crucial distinction to make, I think. It's not just, a marketplace that happens to sell cheap stuff. The sources you've given us make it really clear this platform is deeply engineered.
Engineer how?
Well, it leverages user psychology. It's absolutely voracious about collecting data, and it's designed specifically to create this kind of buying loop. It really feels like it's showing us where a big chunk of e-commerce is probably headed in the future.
And it's not even the future. It's kind of here now in a big way. I mean, Temu was the most downloaded e-commerce app globally in 2023.
Right, globally.
It even surpassed Amazon on the U.S. app stores for a while. And it's made this huge splash in Europe with that slogan, shop like a billionaire.
Which, let's be honest, with those prices, you almost feel like you could, for a minute.
Yeah, for a minute maybe. But that incredible growth, that dominance, it's not an accident, is it?
Oh, not at all. It's the result of a very deliberate, incredibly well-funded strategy. And this deep dive, using the sources you provided us, is really all about trying to pull back the curtain, to understand that strategy, the tech that powers it, and frankly, some of the less visible implications of its rise.
Okay, so let's get into it. How did this whole thing even start? Because Temu didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's definitely not some, plucky startup story.
No, not in the slightest. Temu is actually directly linked to PDD Holdings. And PDD Holdings is a massive player in the Chinese e-commerce scene.
PDD Holdings.
Yeah, the setup is kind of globalized now. Registered in the Cayman Islands, admin apparently in Ireland, which, sources often note is for tax efficiency reasons.
Right.
But the core engineering, the technology, the logistics operations, that's all fundamentally based in China.
And PDD Holdings, they had a big success before Temu, didn't they? Back in, 2015?
That's right. They launched Pinduoduo in China. Now, most of us outside China probably didn't hear much about it back then.
No, I hadn't.
But within just a few years, it was seriously competing with giants like Alibaba and JD.com. It racked up, get this, under 800 million active users.
Wow. 800 million. How did it grow so fast against those established players? What was the secret sauce?
Well, Pinduoduo wasn't just about low prices, initially anyway. It was really a kind of laboratory for new e-commerce ideas, especially something called social commerce.
Social commerce.
Totally.
Think group buys, where the price drops if more people join in. Or getting rewards for sharing links with your friends. It turned shopping into this sort of collective, slightly viral activity.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't just about me buying something. It was about getting me to pull my friends onto the platform, too.
Exactly. It was turning users into, informal marketing agents for the platform.
Yeah.
But just as importantly, maybe even more so, the other huge goal was collecting the absolute maximum amount of behavioral data.
What kind of data?
Everything. Every click, every scroll, how long you hover over an image, what you add to your cart, then remove, what you ignore completely. Pinduoduo was basically mastering the art of understanding what you want or what you might want just by watching how you behave online.
So they took that whole playbook, the social stuff, the intense data collection, and just decided, right, let's take this global.
That's pretty much it. In 2022, PDD Holdings launched Temu for the international market. New name, different app interface, but the fundamental methods, the underlying tech, and that core objective grab your attention and, ideally, never let it go. It's all the same DNA.
Which brings us right back to that, well, not $1,000,000 question, maybe the €3 drill question. How are these prices even possible? How can shipping something tiny halfway across the world cost less than sending a letter across town?
Yeah, it feels like it breaks basic economics, doesn't it?
It really does.
So the sources explain this isn't a traditional business model aimed at profit, at least not right now. It's a conquest strategy.
Yeah.
And it's built on loss.
Built on loss.
Yeah. Currently, the platform makes basically nothing on the sales themselves. In fact, according to the sources we looked at, they're estimated to be losing somewhere around $30 on average for every single order that's placed.
Wait, hang on. Losing $30 per order, that sounds like a spectacularly bad business plan. How is that even sustainable?
Well, it's only sustainable if your immediate goal isn't making money on the sale. Their real objective right now seems to be user acquisition, pure and simple.
Just get eyeballs.
Get as many new users onto the platform as possible, as quickly as possible, and, crucially, rapidly enrich that massive behavioral database they started building back with Pinduoduo. Those losses, they're essentially just the cost of acquiring a customer and their data.
And they're throwing unbelievable amounts of money at that goal. The sources mentioned over $1 billion just in 2023.
Yep, over $1 billion dedicated just to advertising and subsidies to get people on board.
Wow.
A really prime example was their Super Bowl ad in the US this year. The single most watched TV event in America, something like 123 million viewers.
Yeah, huge audience.
Temu reportedly paid around $7 million for just one 30-second ad spot during that game.
$7 million for 30 seconds. What kind of immediate return could possibly justify that spend?
Well, the return wasn't measured in immediate profit from sales linked to the ad. It was measured in downloads and user visits. Data from SimilarWeb, cited in the sources, showed that on that Super Bowl Sunday, individual visits to Temu globally jumped by nearly a quarter compared to the previous Sunday.
A quarter. That's huge.
Yeah, that's an estimated 8.2 million more people checking out the site and app that day. And interestingly, the same data showed Amazon and eBay actually saw their visits drop slightly by 5% and 2% respectively during that same period. The ad clearly worked to grab attention.
And it feels like once you've even glanced at a Temu ad or, heaven forbid, clicked on one,
Oh, yeah.
you're just absolutely flooded with them everywhere online. TikTok, Snap, Facebook, websites. It's relentless. Always trying to pull you back in.
That's all part of the strategy, right? To create that habit, that impulse to check Temu. And yes, the sources are pretty clear that the products themselves are often subsidized internally, too.
So they lose money on the product and the shipping.
Often, yes. Because the priority isn't the profit on that one transaction. It's getting you hooked as a user, embedding that habit of checking Temu first, maybe creating a kind of dependence on those rock-bottom prices and the whole experience.
Okay. So they're effectively paying, sometimes heavily, to get me in the door and keep me scrolling. But how are they even making the product so cheaply that losing $30 an order is even part of the calculation? This is where the sources talked about something called the C2M system.
C2M, yeah, that stands for Consumer to Manufacturer. And this system is absolutely fundamental to how Temu operates. It's like it flips the whole traditional retail model completely upside down.
Right, because normally a brand designs something, gets a factory to make a whole load of them, sticks them in a warehouse.
And then crosses their fingers and
Wow.
hopes people actually buy them. They're guessing about demand.
Okay, so how does Temu do it differently?
Temu works in reverse. It starts the second you open the app. Every single thing you do, every scroll, every click, every item you linger on for just an extra second, everything you add to your cart, even if you don't end up buying it, it's all instantly absorbed by their system.
That level of tracking sounds pretty intense.
It is. The algorithm is designed to record your behavior with incredible detail, sometimes down to the millisecond, apparently. Which products you pause on, which styles you keep coming back to, which colors seem to catch your eye, what terms you search for.
And it's not just tracking me, is it? It's doing this for everyone using the app.
Exactly. It's doing this simultaneously for millions of users all around the world.
So it's watching millions of mez all at once.
Precisely. And by scaling up that data collection, the algorithm can spot trends emerging almost in real time. So if suddenly, across thousands, maybe tens of thousands of users, there's a little spike in interest for a specific style of, say, bedside lamp or a particular type of graphic on a t-shirt.
The algorithm flags that trend immediately.
Right. And that trend data, the sort of aggregated picture of what consumers are currently interested in, gets sent directly to their network of partner factories in China. That's the C2M model in action.
So the factories only make what the data says people are already looking at.
Pretty much. They produce only what the real-time data indicates has a high probability of selling right now. They don't need to gamble on what might be popular next season or even next month. They're making what the collective data suggests people want today.
Wow. So that cuts out all that risk of making too much stuff. No warehouses packed with things nobody ended up wanting. No need for massive clearance sales later.
Exactly. Minimal wasted production, hardly any sitting inventory, and far fewer middlemen in that chain between the factory floor and what the consumer seems to desire. They're essentially producing on demand, but the demand is predicted by user behavior before the order is even placed. The sources even suggest sometimes AI-generated images might be used to quickly test reactions to product ideas based on these emerging trends.
And the speed of this whole feedback loop must be incredibly quick.
It's designed to be almost real-time. This entire C2M engine is driven by what one of the sources called Temu's brain, that massively powerful recommendation algorithm. When you're scrolling through the app, nothing you see is really random.
So every product is shown to me for a reason.
Yes. Every product placement is essentially a prediction. It's based on your past behavior, the behavior of millions of other users, especially those who seem similar to you, and it's predicting what you're most likely to click on and ultimately buy.
Huh. So just by browsing the app, just clicking around, I'm not just a potential customer. I'm actually acting as like a real-time market researcher.
And effectively, yeah, the trigger for manufacturing.
Wow.
You are the client, the product tester, and the catalyst for production all rolled into one. That constant live feedback loop from millions of users, that's arguably Temu's most potent operational weapon.
Okay, but even with that super efficient production, you still have the problem of getting the actual product from a factory in China to my doorstep, potentially halfway across the world.
Right, the shipping challenge.
And somehow, that shipping is often free or costs practically nothing, even for really small, cheap items. How is that physically possible?
This is where another really crucial but maybe less widely known system comes into play. It's called iPacket. And Temu uses the system on an absolutely massive scale. It gives them a huge advantage in logistics.
I pack it.
Yeah.
Never heard of it. Is it something Temu set up themselves?
No, it's not their own invention.
Sure.
iPacket actually came out of a shipping agreement that was established way back in 2011, initially just between the US and China.
Okay.
But it was later expanded to include over 40 countries, including a lot of places in Europe, France, Belgium, the UK, and Canada too.
And what was the original point of this agreement?
The initial idea was actually pretty simple. It was meant to make it easier and, importantly, cheaper for small Chinese e-commerce merchants to ship small packages, typically things under 2 kilograms, to buyers internationally. It was designed to help the little guys, basically. Give them preferential shipping rates to boost cross-border sales.
But now, it's being used by giants shipping millions and millions of packages.
That's exactly what the sources suggest. The system is now being used, or as some imply, maybe exploited beyond its original purpose by these e-commerce behemoths like Temu, but also others like AliExpress and Shein. They use iPacket to ship millions upon millions of individual small parcels by air directly from China at incredibly low rates.
So how does it work? The order goes from the factory, handled by China Post, gets put into the iPacket system, and then what?
Then it's typically flown by air freight under the iPacket agreement terms. Once it lands in the destination country, it gets handed over to the local postal service, like Royal Mail here, La Poste in France, USPS in the States, Canada Post, whoever it is.
And Temu isn't paying the standard commercial rate for that whole international journey.
That seems to be the key point. They are reportedly not paying the actual commercial cost of providing that entire end-to-end delivery service. And this difference can be huge. It can mean that shipping a small item from China to Europe or North America using iPacket costs significantly less than it would cost you or me to ship that same small item between 2 cities within our own country.
That just seems fundamentally unfair. It creates a completely uneven playing field for local businesses.
It absolutely does. It allows Temu and others using the system similarly to offer those ultra-competitive prices that include delivery. That makes it incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, for local retailers and businesses to compete when they have to pay standard, unsubsidized shipping rates for everything.
Okay. So Temu's figured out hyper-efficient production using C2M. They've got incredibly cheap global shipping thanks to iPacket, and it's all powered by harvesting massive amounts of user data. But there's still something else about the app experience itself, isn't there? Something that keeps people glued to it, beyond just the low prices.
Definitely. It's not just a shop. It's very deliberately designed to feel and function like a video game. This is their gamification strategy, and they are masters at it.
Gamification, applying game design ideas to shopping.
Exactly. And Temu is like a textbook example. The second you open that app, you're often hit with game mechanics, spinning wheels for discounts, daily login bonuses,
Hmm.
goals to achieve like invite friends, pop-ups saying someone just bought the item you're looking at, countdown timers on deals, free gifts you have to unlock, urgent push notifications.
Yeah, you see those little animations, the coins adding up. It definitely feels like you're constantly being nudged to interact, to chase some kind of reward.
And these tactics are borrowed directly from the design playbook of highly addictive mobile games, even things like online casinos or slot machines. They're engineered to trigger the reward centers in your brain, creating a sort of compulsive behavioral loop, keep you coming back for another hit.
And there's that element of randomness or uncertainty too.
Yes, that's key. Like gambling or even just endlessly scrolling through a social media feed like TikTok, you don't know exactly what amazing deal or what little bonus you might find next. It's that variable reward schedule that's known to be highly effective at keeping people hooked. You click, you scroll, maybe you get a tiny discount or a few coins. You feel like you want something.
Even though you probably still bought something.
Right, you still paid. But that feeling reinforces the behavior, makes you want to come back and spin the wheel again or see what deal pops up next.
And the end result for the user is,
Well, more time spent in the app, more scrolling, more clicking, and very often more buying. Even if you didn't open the app intending to buy anything specific, you get drawn in by the game.
and the outcome for Temu from all this game playing.
While you're busy feeling like you snagged a bargain or won a coupon, every single one of those clicks, every spin, every interaction is just more granular data being fed straight back into their system. It allows them to understand your triggers, your preferences, your behavior with ever-increasing precision, which, naturally, leads us to some of the more serious concerns the sources bring up, especially around data, privacy, and the technical side of the app.
Yeah, let's be blunt about this. Based on what the sources are saying, the real business model here isn't actually selling us cheap stuff, is it?
I mean, that's how the sources tend to frame it. The products themselves, those incredibly cheap gadgets and clothes, they're essentially the bait, or maybe the interface. They exist to facilitate the actual business,
Which is?
which is the extraction, analysis, and exploitation of the enormous volumes of behavioral data generated by millions of people using the app every day.
And this data, obviously, must be incredibly valuable to someone.
Oh, immensely valuable. It has huge commercial worth, especially for the vast network of Chinese manufacturers and suppliers who sell through the platform. Temu can essentially provide them with unparalleled real-time insights into global consumer trends, what's hot right now, what's likely to be hot next week, and incredibly detailed profiles of exactly who is interested in buying what.
And is this data potentially being shared more widely with third parties?
Well, the sources indicate that, much like many other large digital platforms, it's certainly possible, maybe even likely, that some of this data is shared or monetized with other companies, probably for things like highly targeted advertising, broader market analysis, or other commercial purposes. We don't have full transparency on that.
There was one source that put it very starkly, didn't it?
Yeah, one source had a very pointed conclusion on this. It basically said, what Temu is really selling isn't that €2 gadget you just bought. It's you. Your data profile, your behavior, your predicted desires.
Wow, that definitely gives you pause. And then there's the technical side. The app itself, when you install it, it asks for a lot of permissions on your phone, doesn't it?
It really does. If you download Temu, you'll likely see it requesting quite broad access, things like your browsing history, your precise geographical location, access to photos and files stored on your device, information about your activity on other apps you use, even potentially access to your microphone.
That seems like a lot just for a shopping app. And weren't there some really concerning reports specifically about the Chinese version, Pinduoduo, last year?
Yes, that caused quite a stir. In 2023, cybersecurity researchers reported finding sophisticated malware embedded within the Pinduoduo app, the Chinese domestic version.
And this wasn't just like aggressive advertising tracking.
No, according to the reports, it was far beyond that. The malware was described as having advanced capabilities, things like being able to access private messages, change settings, view data from other apps, potentially even bypass user security permissions and install more malicious code, all while hiding its own presence. It sounded pretty serious. Google even suspended Pinduoduo from the Play Store for a time because of it.
But Temu and Pinduoduo, they're officially presented as separate apps,
Mhm.
right? Even though they have the same parent company.
Officially, yes, they are distinct apps under the PDD Holdings umbrella. However, the sources we looked at point out that the exact technical links, the sharing of code, and the connections through personnel between the two applications are, well, they're not transparent or clear at all. And crucially, the source code for both apps is closed, proprietary.
Which makes it hard for outsiders to check what's really going on under the hood.
Exactly. It makes it very difficult for independent security researchers to perform a full, thorough analysis and say definitively what the apps are or are not capable of doing.
So what did the more recent reports, looking specifically at the Temu app itself, find? Was there malware found in Temu too?
Well, there was a report cited from the Swiss National Cybersecurity Institute, and at that specific time, they stated they did not find direct proof of active malware or spying functionality within the Temu app itself. So that particular report didn't find, a current smoking gun of active malicious software running.
Okay, no active malware found in that instance. But did they note anything unusual about how the app behaves technically?
Yes, and this is where it still raises some eyebrows.
Huh.
The researchers highlighted two technical practices within the Temu app that they considered uncommon and potentially concerning from a security perspective.
They were there.
First, the app seemed to have the ability to modify its own functionality, basically, add or remove features, or change how it operates internally without needing a standard update downloaded through the official app stores like Google Play or Apple's App Store.
Wait, it can change itself remotely without an official update.
That was the implication of the findings. This kind of self-updating or dynamic code loading is pretty rare for legitimate apps, partly because it bypasses the usual security reviews and checks that the app stores perform before they approve and distribute updates. It could potentially be used, hypothetically, to introduce new code or change behavior without user notification or the standard security vetting.
Okay, that sounds a bit iffy.
Yeah.
What was the second unusual behavior they noted?
They found that certain parts of the app utilize extra, non-standard layers of encryption or obfuscation. Now, while strong encryption can be perfectly legitimate for protecting user data and securing communications,
Right.
the experts suggested that these specific techniques could also potentially be used to deliberately mask or hide the nature of the data being transferred, or even conceal certain functions of the app itself, making it much harder for security tools or researchers to monitor exactly what the app is sending and receiving.
Okay, so let's sum that up. One specific report didn't find active malware in Temu at that time. But the way the app is built, its ability to potentially change itself without updates, and its use of heavy obfuscation makes it really hard for anyone to be completely sure what it's doing. And it raises significant questions about transparency and potential future risks.
That's a fair summary. It doesn't provide definitive proof of current danger in that report, but the technical practices observed make independent verification difficult and leave the door open for potential misuse that would be hard to detect.
Okay, so beyond the data harvesting and the technical question marks, there's another massive issue that comes up when you're talking about a platform flooding the market with millions of ultra-cheap products from countless different manufacturers.
Yeah, the big one. Product quality and safety.
Right. How on earth can they possibly ensure that all these different items actually meet basic quality standards or, more importantly, safety regulations in the countries where they're being sold?
Well, Temu's official line, according to the sources, is that they are careful about this. They state they have processes in place and perform random checks in their warehouses to try and ensure compliance.
Okay, that's what they say. But what did the sources find about the reality of products available on the platform?
The reality seems quite different, unfortunately. Despite those claims, the sources report that a significant number of non-compliant and sometimes dangerously unsafe items reportedly remain readily available for sale.
Were there specific examples?
Yes, several. One striking example cited was a test conducted by the Swiss Toy Association. They bought 12 different toys from Temu. Of those 12, they found that 11 failed to meet European safety standards and should not have been legally sold in Europe.
11 out of 12.
Yeah.
Wow. And we're not just talking about like minor labeling issues here.
Absolutely not. The sources give very concrete examples of the kinds of risks involved. We're talking about things like a small part on a baby toy that could easily break off, posing a serious choking hazard. Or another example was a ring that was tested and found to contain levels of carcinogenic heavy metals, cadmium I think it was, that were literally 4,000 times higher than the legal limit allowed in jewelry.
4,000 times. That's staggering. These are really serious safety failures.
They really are. These aren't just bureaucratic regulations. They exist to prevent genuine harm.
So what happens when specific dangerous products like these are identified and reported to Temu?
Temu has stated publicly that when specific problematic products are brought to their attention, they investigate the claims and, if verified, they remove those particular items from sale.
Okay, so they take down the specific listing.
Yes. But, as the sources quickly point out, removing one specific listing doesn't necessarily address the systemic issue. The concern remains that many other very similar, potentially equally non-compliant or unsafe items might still be listed by other sellers on the platform, and they might slip through whatever checks are in place. It's a whack-a-mole problem on a massive scale.
And the health concerns go beyond just immediate physical dangers like choking or heavy metals, right? There were broader worries mentioned.
Yes, definitely. Experts quoted in the sources express particular concern that many products readily available through these types of ultra-low-cost platforms reportedly contain chemical substances known to carry serious long-term health risks.
Like what kinds of substances?
Things linked to endocrine disruption, fertility problems, potentially even sterility, increased risk of premature births, and carcinogenic effects. There's a specific worry voiced about these substances being present in items like children's clothing, things that have prolonged contact with sensitive skin.
Okay, so given this whole catalog of concerns we've discussed, the unusual business model based on loss and data capture, the potentially unfair logistics advantage, the addictive gamification techniques, the serious data privacy and technical questions, and now these major product safety and quality issues, it feels almost inevitable that regulators would have to start paying close attention.
It certainly felt like it was only a matter of time. And indeed, the European Commission officially took action. They formally requested explanations from Temu back in October 2024.
Okay, the European Commission got involved. What specifically are they concerned about? What are they asking Temu?
The core of their inquiry revolves around whether Temu is meeting its legal obligations under the Digital Services Act, the DSA. That's a major piece of European regulation designed specifically to govern large online platforms.
Right, the DSA. What does that actually require platforms like Temu to do? Because Temu is big enough to fall under its strictest rules, isn't it?
Yes. Temu has been designated as a very large online platform, or a VLOP under the DSA, which triggers the highest level of obligations. These include things like needing to ensure sellers on their platform are clearly identified and traceable, having robust systems to detect and quickly remove dangerous or illegal products, fighting against deceptive interfaces or dark patterns like maybe some of those aggressive gamification tactics, and crucially, providing much greater transparency about how their recommendation algorithms work, the ones deciding what products you see.
So the commission basically sent Temu a formal letter saying, show us how you're complying with all these rules.
That's essentially it. Temu was given a deadline, which was October 21st, to provide detailed explanations and evidence demonstrating their compliance. Now, depending on that response, the Commission has the power to open a full formal investigation into the platform's practices.
And if they did open a formal investigation, what could the consequences be for Temu?
Potentially. Very significant indeed. If a formal investigation concludes that Temu is not meeting its DSA obligations, it could lead to hefty financial penalties. The DSA allows for fines of up to 6% of a company's total global annual turnover.
6% of global turnover. Given Temu's scale, that could be billions.
Potentially, yes. Billions of euros. It's designed to have real teeth for these massive global platforms.
So what's the current status of that? Is there a formal investigation underway?
As of the time the sources we reviewed were published, it seemed that process was still ongoing. The deadline for response had passed, and the Commission would be evaluating Temu's submission. Temu, for their part, has publicly stated that they take their legal obligations very seriously and that they are cooperating fully with the European authorities.
But in the meantime, while that whole regulatory process grinds forward,
Well, exactly. Until and unless concrete measures or fines or specific operational changes are formally imposed as a result of that regulatory action, the platform largely continues to operate using the same strategies and methods we've been discussing. As one source rather dryly put it, while the lawyers are busy drafting responses, the algorithm is still running the show 24/7.
right, okay. So we've really covered a lot of ground here. We've dug into Temu's origins with PDD holdings in China, that aggressive loss-leading strategy fueled by massive advertising spending, the super-efficient C2M production system reacting to user data, the controversial iPacket logistics advantage, the highly addictive gamification design, the idea that the core business really is data, the technical opacity and privacy worries, those significant product safety concerns, and now the looming regulatory pressure, particularly in Europe. That's a lot to take in.
It really paints a very complex, multifaceted picture, doesn't it? And while Temu itself, as a specific company and platform, certainly raises a whole host of significant questions and concerns based on these sources, perhaps the most profoundly thought-provoking point that comes out of all this isn't just about Temu itself.
What do you mean?
It's about us, the users, our relationship with platforms that are built and operate on these kinds of models.
How so?
Because ultimately, Teamer's astonishing success, its entire existence and explosive growth trajectory, it all fundamentally depends on one single thing happening over and over again.
We have to click.
We have to click. The platform only exists because we engage with it.
And that's the real paradox here, isn't it? We see those crazy low prices. We might have a nagging feeling or even know explicitly that there could be something, well, dubious going on behind the scenes. Maybe it's environmentally questionable with all that air freight for tiny items. Maybe it's unfair competition crushing local businesses. Maybe there are unanswered questions about our data privacy. Maybe, as we've seen, there are definite risks with product safety. But we often click anyway.
Because, as the sources bluntly point out, it's just so incredibly cheap. Because the user experience is deliberately engineered, using all those gamified hooks, to be engaging and, yes, quite addictive. And maybe just because it's so accessible, it's right there on our phones, a few taps away. C'est là, as one French source put it. It's just there.
So Temu isn't just a single company acting in a vacuum. It's almost like a symptom, or maybe a reflection of something bigger happening in commerce.
It really feels like it could be reflecting a potential future direction, or at least one powerful direction, for global retail, a model that's characterized by minimal physical stock actually held by the platform itself, effectively borderless operations enabled by logistics loopholes, perhaps a different kind of ethical calculus that's driven almost purely by user data metrics and engagement figures, all powered by billions upon billions of individual user clicks.
And that brings us right back to that final deeper question that the sources pose, which really reframes this whole discussion away from just Temu itself.
Yeah, it shifts the focus entirely, doesn't it? It suggests the most important question we should be asking ourselves is no longer just the simple transactional one. How much does this item cost? Measured in pounds or euros or dollars?
Yeah, and instead, what does engaging with this platform, this model, really cost us?
Exactly. Thinking about the cost, not just in money, but in terms of our personal data, the collective environmental impact of this kind of hyper-consumerism fueled by rapid global shipping, the pressure it puts on alternative retail ecosystems and local economies, and perhaps most subtly, the cost in terms of shaping our own digital habits, our attention spans, and our relationship with consumption itself when we're constantly presented with these highly engineered, loss-leading, gamified shopping experiences.
Wow. Well, that certainly gives us and you a lot to chew on. We've taken a really deep dive into the sources you provided to try and understand the Temu engine from its origins and strategy through its technology, its logistics, its user engagement tactics, and right up to the significant concerns being raised about data, safety, and regulation. So now that you have all this information distilled from those sources, what do you think about Temu and maybe more broadly about the implications of platforms operating with these kinds of models?
Yeah, maybe just take a moment next time you're interacting with a platform like this and think about the full spectrum of the value exchange that's actually taking place. Because, as the sources suggest, it extends far, far beyond just the price tag you see on the screen.